Cobra Kai has landed on Netflix and now everyone wants to be a true Cobra. Well, if you want to call yourself a Cobra, here are 25 facts about Cobra Kai that you need. There are a lot of remakes, reboots, and long-awaited sequels out there that don't always seem to be very proud of their source material. We've all seen a movie that's based on something popular from the 80s that misses the entire point of why the property was great in the first place. Well, Cobra Kai is definitely not one of those shows. Cobra Kai loves the Karate Kid so much that it actually shows us more of it than we got in the movie. That's right, if something about that LaRusso versus Lawrence fight seemed new to you, that's because it was. There was a lot of footage from the original that got left on the cutting room floor. What you see of the famous final match in the series is vintage Karate Kid repurposed for the new series. Cobra Kai does a fantastic job of setting itself up as the next generation of the Karate Kid franchise. One of the coolest ideas that the show plays around with is that Daniel LaRusso is now the new Mr. Miyagi. He uses bonsai trees in his advertisements, makes Japanese food, and even opens up his own dojo to honor his former master. He even uses the same wax-on, wax-off method of training. The main reason that this works is that LaRusso seems to be about Miyagi's age now. Only that's not entirely accurate. Ralph Macchio is actually 5 years older than Pat Morita was during the original film. Apparently, selling cars and doing karate is really good for the skin. The television show goes to great lengths to show that things have changed drastically for LaRusso and Lawrence since the first movie came out. In the original film, LaRusso was the scrappy poor kid who moved into a cheap apartment with his mother. Lawrence, on the other hand, was the overprivileged rich kid who became LaRusso's nemesis. Only now, the two have switched, with LaRusso rolling in the big bucks while Lawrence struggles just to pay rent. If you look closely, you can see that they've even designed Lawrence's apartment to look much like the LaRusso family home in the original. It's that level of care and attention to detail that truly makes Cobra Kai a worthy successor to the original. For years, there was an incredibly popular fan theory that recontextualized every single event in The Karate Kid. You see, the original film was framed around Daniel's perspective. We saw him struggle to fit into a new school, seeing as he was a poor kid from New Jersey. Then, things got better when he met the beautiful Allie. Of course, that's when things took a turn, and he started getting bullied by Lawrence and the Cobra Kais to the point that he had to learn karate to defend himself. Well, the fan theory actually stated that LaRusso was actually the villain the whole time. He starts almost every confrontation with Lawrence and the Cobras. He tried to take Johnny's girl. He even used an illegal kick to win in the end. Cobra Kai not only brought up this theory, but built a show around it. Who do you think is the villain? The Karate Kid is one of those movies that is so classic that literally every aspect of it is iconic. Cobra Kai goes to great lengths to recreate as much of that magic as is possible. Everything from the Cobra uniforms to the dojo fits the spirit of the original film perfectly. It is a masterclass on how to recreate a world that was formed decades ago and fit it to the spirit of the modern day. That being said, some things you just can't recreate. Sometimes the best way to bring back the spirit of the past is to have something from the past as a totem. That's why it is so cool that Daniel LaRusso's headband that he uses as a symbol for his return to karate is actually the headband from the original movie. You can't get better than that. Cobra Kai Season 1 was so great that it almost seemed impossible for the second season to improve upon it. The series followed the formula that made The Karate Kid such an instant classic, but it came at the story from an entirely new perspective that makes you rethink every single scene of the original film. That's why it was so impressive that Season 2 blew the original one away. One of the coolest ways it did this was by having the original Cobras reunite. It was tragic that Tommy ended up passing away, but what was more tragic is that actor Rob Garrison, who played Tommy, passed away shortly after the episode was released. Let's face it, we all love catching up with Johnny and Daniel after so many years, but Cobra Kai would have utterly failed if it didn't deliver a compelling new generation of fighters to carry on their legacy. That is not an easy task, as each of these characters had to perform complex fight scenes that I know I couldn't handle. Luckily, many of the members of the cast were martial artists or had experience in dance choreography to help with the stunts. The actor who plays Miguel studies Shotokan karate, for instance, which probably helps with those savage Cobra Kai moves that he unleashes upon his enemies. I wonder if any of them have started to incorporate the Cobra Kai philosophy into their martial arts. If so, I'd hate to be their competition. It often seems like Daniel LaRusso has the perfect life. He's got a beautiful wife and kids, his car dealership is amazing, and honestly, he looks so young that you'd never realize that the actress who plays his wife is a full 20 years younger than he is. Things at the LaRusso home aren't always perfect, though. As we saw in Season 1, tensions between his wife and mother tend to run pretty hot. Daniel struggles to deal with this, considering how great a mom she was way back in the original movie. To drive this point home, the series made sure to get the original actress Randy Heller back for the new series. There are few beefs in the history of film that run as deep as the one between Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence. These two are enemies for the ages, so much so that they managed to make an entire series around the two, reigniting the beef decades later. So how crazy is it to find out that real-life actors Ralph Macchio and William Zabka were friends? Yes, the two confirmed that while their characters may have hated each other, the two bonded quite a lot over the years. Evidently, that bond grew deeper when the actor who played Mr. Miyagi, Pat Morita, sadly passed away. Still though, something about it doesn't sit right. It'd be like finding out that Batman and the Joker actually owned a bed and breakfast together in Gotham City. The wait between the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai was a long time for fans of the series to see William Zabka and Ralph Macchio reunite. That being said, Cobra Kai wasn't actually the first series to feature the pair coming back together. In an episode of the sitcom How I Met Your Mother, Barney Stinson reveals that he believes Johnny Lawrence to be the real Karate Kid while Daniel LaRusso is the villain. That's why it was so hilarious to see Ralph Macchio crash his bachelor party with a personality that mirrored Barney's. What was even better was the eventual reveal that the party clown his friends got him was actually William Zabka all along. You just know Barney's new favorite show is Cobra Kai. The Karate Kid was great, but a series can only rest on the laurels of its original property for so long. The only way a sequel actually proves its worth is by bringing something new to the table. That's why Cobra Kai's trademark 80s nostalgia and hard-cutting wit work well for the franchise. It's no surprise that the creator of the series, Josh Heald, got his start with this exact kind of wit. He was the writer for the Hot Tub Time Machine movie, which also featured plenty of throwback 80s humor, and even Johnny Lawrence himself, William Zabka. While the second Hot Tub Time Machine film may have failed to recapture the magic of the original, Heald wisely decided to pivot to television where Cobra Kai has thrived. What 80s property should he hit next? Johnny Lawrence had a rough time after the Karate Kid. His life seemed to just go from one disaster to the next as he failed at most of his jobs, as a father and as a husband to his wife Shannon. We see Shannon several times over the series, and let's just say that things probably worked out better for Johnny in the long run here. What's cool about Shannon is that this isn't the first time her and Zabka have appeared together. You see, in Hot Tub Time Machine, Tiora Baird also played Zabka's wife. We may not get to see much of their marriage in Cobra Kai, but at least this is something. Of all the kids in The Karate Kid who don't appear in the series, there is one who casts the largest shadow. That is, of course, the ex-girlfriend of both Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso, Allie. This young beauty seems to have broken both men in different ways, as both seem to look back on their time with her with wistful longing, even if one of them is happily married. For Johnny, it seems like things run deeper. In many ways, she's the one that got away. So that's why it's no surprise that it's being hinted around that Elizabeth Shue may reappear for Cobra Kai. Hey, she still looked good enough to seduce Homelander and the boys, so why not? While Cobra Kai pays a lot of respect to the original Karate Kid movie, it doesn't seem to look as favorably upon the various sequels in the series. I mean, there were several movies and a reboot long before Johnny Lawrence reopened his dojo. I doubt we'll ever hear a reference to the Jaden Smith movie. That being said, it looks like we might see some characters from the first sequel, The Karate Kid Part 2. Daniel LaRusso is said to be returning to Okinawa, and I hope he runs into one of his other big rivals, Chozen. In that film, Chozen was less a martial arts rival than he was a thug who Daniel had to take down. Round 2, anyone? The Karate Kid had a lot of style, even if we're not talking about those sweet Cobra Kai outfits. Seriously though, where do I get one of those? Anyway, one of the coolest things in the original movie was the car that Daniel got to drive around in. He may have had to wax on, wax off the vehicle for Mr. Miyagi, but it was totally worth it in the end. What poor kid doesn't want to cruise around in a sweet ride he'd normally never get to try out? That's probably a big part of the reason why he became a car salesman. This is further exemplified by the exact same car car appearing in the series. The karate may have taught him balance, but that car gave Daniel LaRusso a career. It's kind of funny to think back on the first episode where Lawrence addressed the Cobra Kai crowd. At that time, they thought that his method of teaching was insane and more than a bit outdated. To be fair, even he has admitted that. To a point. That attitude about their sensei didn't last long though. As the characters got more and more into Cobra Kai, you can see that their clothing changed as well. Many times throughout the series, the Cobras wear their Cobra Kai colors to signify their allegiance to Sensei Lawrence and Cobra Kai at all times. At the beginning of the series, Eli was a shy kid with an awkward scar that made him feel like a freak. Kids bullied him for it, and it seemed like he would never be accepted for anything else. If you rewatch that first episode, it's actually shocking how that shy, embarrassed kid is compared to who he would become. That all changed when Lawrence pushed him so hard that he reinvented his entire personality. He got a giant mohawk, a dramatic back tattoo, and a fierce new attitude. Over the run of the show, his scar has slowly faded as well, symbolizing how much he's grown past it. In many ways, Eli is gone. There is only Hawk. In the first episode of the series, Lawrence is shown watching a movie that looks like a cheap ripoff of Top Gun. To be fair, that is the exact type of movie that you know the adult Johnny Lawrence would be all about. That film is called Iron Eagle, and believe it or not, it actually released in 1986, the same year as Top Gun and 2 years after The Karate Kid. It also featured a former Cobra Kai. Rob Garrison, who played Tommy in The Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, had a small role in Iron Eagle as Packer. Man, they really went all out on the Cobra Kai references. There was something incredibly awesome about the original Cobras reuniting after all these years. Sure, it's been great to see Johnny Lawrence reclaim some of his past glory, but that doesn't compare to watching him reunite with his crew from back in the day. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the entire crew back together. In the show, the explanation is that Dutch was in jail. The real reason is that actor Chad McQueen left acting to become a race car driver and then started McQueen Racing LLC. Honestly, turning down a chance at a big Hollywood comeback for your racing company is still a pretty Cobra Kai thing to do. There are a lot of subtle ways that Cobra Kai references the differences between longtime rivals Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence. They have different attitudes, different incomes, and completely different fighting styles. In many ways, these two started off as polar opposites and only became more different as time went by. That's why it's so interesting to see the really small nods the show makes to this. Throughout the series, Lawrence is shown to favor cheap beer even when he gets some money. In contrast, Daniel will often drink a martini or a much more expensive beer to show how classy he is by comparison. Man, these guys can't even agree on alcohol. Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso were icons of the 1980s, so it only seems right that the two characters would still be trapped in that decade, even in the 21st century. The running joke for Lawrence is that he seems to have resisted all technological advancements almost as if he had a phobia against them. He barely knows what a website is, has no knowledge of Facebook, and struggles to make a commercial. In sharp contrast, LaRusso's entire home is built around technology, but he seems to hate it. He is constantly trying to get his kids away from their devices and purposefully trains in the woods where he gets no cell reception. Things did not start well for Johnny when he started the Cobra Kai dojo. The clients didn't exactly come pouring in until Miguel showed his skills off to the entire cafeteria. No, at first it seemed like he would barely be able to keep the place running for a month. That was even before LaRusso conspired to get his rent hiked up. The first thing Johnny did was rent his dojo out as a yoga studio to sublet the rent. This was hilarious because yoga represents everything that Cobra Kai stands against. Well, you'd think so anyway. What was the first pose they did in the studio? The Cobra! It's clear that Lawrence and LaRusso have gone in different directions, but the same can be said for their actors William Zabka and Ralph Macchio. The success of The Karate Kid kept Macchio working in some fashion for decades, most recently on HBO's The Deuce. Zabka, however, had a career much like Lawrence's. Before Cobra Kai, it seemed like his acting days were more or less done. That would make Cobra Kai a true resurgence for both character and actor. Never count a true Cobra out. Okay, I gotta be straight up about this one. It's gonna hurt at first, but I promise it has a happy ending. During The Karate Kid, Johnny Lawrence may have known all sorts of sick Cobra Kai moves, but that doesn't mean that the actor did. Yes, I'm sorry to tell you, but William Zabka actually wasn't a martial artist during the filming of the movie. All of that did change, however. After the film, Zabka trained extensively in karate. He did have to retrain to get back into fighting shape for Cobra Kai, but the skills were all there. All I want to know is whether he trained in a normal gi or his Cobra Kai uniform. I have some really great news for you Cobra Kai fans out there. It's not good enough that the show moved to Netflix. No, it has actually been renewed for Season 3. The third run of the popular series has already been shot and will release sometime in 2021. That means that we'll be taught the core principles of Cobra Kai for years. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy.
Ah, young grasshopper. You want to see 25 things you missed in Cobra Kai? Well, you came to the right dojo, the Screen Rant. So, like everyone else, us included, you've binged through Season 3 of Cobra Kai, right? I mean, what else is there to do during a pandemic? Now, like me, after not having a coffee for 3 hours, you are having some serious withdrawal symptoms. Well, don't worry, we've got you covered. We are going to take a look at 25 things you might have missed in Cobra Kai Season 3, including Easter eggs to the original movies, awesome behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and even references to some internet theories.
Are you sure this is right?
So, let's show no fear and dive right into some Season 3 details. And beware, spoilers will strike first. So, if you haven't seen Season 3 yet, we suggest coming back when you have. Let's break the ice by taking a look at the Break the Ice Easter egg. In Okinawa, Daniel and Kumiko sit and share a cocktail together at a local bar. The ice provided for said drinks is smashed out of large blocks. Now, if you are a massive Karate Kid fan, this practice may seem somewhat familiar to you. That's because Daniel smashes ice in a similar fashion in the Karate Kid Part 2, where he becomes involved in a wager with Mr. Miyagi's arch-nemesis Sato and his student Chosen. I think I'm going to stick with getting my ice out of an ice tray. It's much easier. Speaking of Chosen, he made his long-awaited return in Season 3, with the show filling in the blanks since his fight with Daniel in Karate Kid 2 to his return in Cobra Kai. Daniel, on his return to Okinawa, reunites with his bitter foe, Chosen, who he hasn't seen for 30 years. Chosen, in an Easter egg to his uncle Sato, pretends to still hate Daniel, leading us to believe he is still the villain.
Can I have a drink?
I don't drink.
But we soon learn that Chosen is actually a changed man and has even been running the Miyagi-Do and teaching there as a sensei. Chosen also states in a heartwarming story that he was suicidal after the events of Karate Kid 2 until Sato helped him to see the light and turn his life around. Chosen also seeks forgiveness and friendship from Kumiko, and eventually Daniel also forgives him and the two end up leaving on good terms, similar to the relationship between Miyagi and Sato in Part 2. But of course, the biggest return to take place in Season 3 is Elizabeth Shue, reprising her character of Allie Mills. Her introduction to the show had been teased since Season 2, so although it wasn't shocking to see her return, it was still an undoubtedly epic moment. But no one knew that Shue would be reprising the character for definite until the very last moment, with Ralph Macchio saying he didn't know she was returning till he received the script.
Why didn't you tell me about this at lunch?
He also said that there was a backup plan in place in case she didn't return, and that they would discover it was actually her husband doing the back and forth with Johnny, which, to be honest, would have been quite strange. Thankfully, they didn't do this, and we got to see Allie back in the flesh. Another, albeit more obscure return, was one you truly might not have noticed. Daniel's journey to Okinawa was initially to help refresh his automobile business's relationship with Diona Motors, but along the way he takes a stroll down nostalgia way. At one point, though, these two roads converge when he meets up with their senior vice president of sales for Diona International. And who should be the senior vice president? None other than Yuna, aka the girl bell ringer, who Daniel saved from a typhoon in Part 2, and is even played by the same actress, Tracy Taguchi. It's another heartwarming moment, as well as a great Easter egg, and is karma truly at its finest. You can never underestimate the power of a good tea.
Sick of tea? That's like being sick of breathing.
Daniel LaRusso also seems to understand the importance of tea, as he meets up and catches up with Kumiko after spending decades apart. Before they have their ice-cold cocktails, they share a hot pot of tea. Like the ice for the cocktails, this too is a reference to Karate Kid Part 2 and the movie's famous tea ceremony. As I said, you really can't underestimate the power of a good tea. Have you ever gotten so mad you've just punched through a car window?
Give me the goddamn page!
Well, in the Karate Kid world, it seems like a sensei tradition to punch through a car's window. In Season 3 of Cobra Kai, we see Daniel doing the apparently time-honored tradition, just like his mentor's enemy Kreese, who ended up breaking car windows as he tried to punch Mr. Miyagi in the beginning of the Karate Kid Part 2. The Cobra Kai outfit are known for their memorable mantras and sayings, and even if you don't agree with them, I'm sure you can remember them. Like seriously, when I say strike first, who doesn't say the words strike hard, no mercy afterwards?
I can't hear you! Strike first, strike hard, no mercy, sir!
But there was a mantra you might have missed in Season 3. As Daniel enters the Cobra Kai dojo in the first episode of Season 3, Aftermath, he sees the mantra, "Fear does not exist," written on the wall. This was Kreese's mantra while training students in the original Karate Kid movie.
Fear does not exist in this dojo, does it? No, Sensei!
We have mentioned a few notable appearances in Season 3 already, but there was one major one to happen at the end of the season, although they didn't actually appear on screen. In the final moments of Season 3, we see Kreese making a phone call to someone he hasn't seen in a long time. Although he doesn't see the person he is talking to, we can say with relative certainty that he was talking to Terry Silver. Silver is a major Cobra Kai benefactor and served as the main antagonist for the Karate Kid Part 3.
A man can't stand. You can't fight.
Silver was also Kreese's old friend during their time serving in the Vietnam War, and we see Kreese's time in Vietnam during a flashback. We even see him saving a guy named Twig, who their commanding officer calls Silver. I wonder if they are setting something up for Season 4. It's a well-known fact that all the coolest people have a cardboard cutout of themselves, right? No? Just me? Okay, well, anyway, Daniel comes across a cutout of Kreese because he's cool like that. Now, while it isn't the exact same cutout from the original movies, Daniel does come across a cutout of Kreese in both Karate Kid Part 1 and Part 3, because as I said, cool guys have cardboard cutouts of themselves. Now, while Chozen and Daniel may have let bygones be bygones, that doesn't mean that they didn't step back into their fighting selves, just like they did in Karate Kid Part 2, even if this time they're not enemies. But as the two go through the motions, the fight ends in a familiar fashion, with Chozen honking Daniel's nose,
Honk!
a move Miyagi performed on Kreese in Part 2. Some of the best moments of the original Karate Kid movie come through Miyagi's abstract and often dangerous methods of teaching. One of these moments is the time Miyagi teaches Daniel how to balance by standing on the bow of a small rowboat. Season 3 of Cobra Kai pays reference to this when Daniel and Sam have a father and daughter moment when they hit the water and the two make a joke about whether or not Daniel will make Sam stand on the bow of the boat.
Is that why you brought me here? To trick me into doing karate?
Well, what? No, not at all. This has nothing to do with that.
Speaking of Miyagi and his infinite wisdom, one of the most famous sayings among many is the line,
"No such thing, bad student, only bad teacher."
They pay homage to this line in Cobra Kai when Kreese echoes the sentiment, saying,
Guess you know what they say. There's no such thing as a bad student.
But Kreese doesn't just pay reference to Miyagi's lines, but also to his very own dialogue. As testosterone flares between Kreese and Daniel, Kreese says,
This time, Johnny and I will finish it once and for all.
Which is certainly a reference to the moment in the final climax of the original movie where Kreese yells at Johnny to finish him. Yeah, I wonder how that turned out. Like cool guys have cardboard cutouts of themselves, everyone knows there is no better place to go on a first date than a mini golf course. No?
Am I so out of touch?
Golf and stuff is an important part of both Cobra Kai and the original Karate Kid series. It's where Ali and Daniel go out on a date, and it's the same place where Miguel and Sam also go out on a first date. Ali and Johnny also go out there in Season 3, and you can even hear the song Feel the Night in the background, the same song from Daniel and Ali's date from the original movie. Now, as we have already mentioned, Daniel's trip to Okinawa is a literal journey down memory lane with Easter eggs aplenty. Another one we see is the return of the house from Karate Kid Part 2, which Kimiko has now inherited from her Aunt Yuki. It's almost as if the trip to Okinawa was just for the purpose of Easter eggs and callbacks or something. For a supposedly non-violent sport, soccer has its fair share of scuffles and fighting, even if it is sometimes rather melodramatic. Therefore, it is the perfect place for Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do to work out their differences, and the two opposing factions end up fighting on the soccer field. This is a direct reference to the original movie where Daniel got into a scuffle with Cobra Kai. Maybe they should just stick to soccer next time. One of the best things about Cobra Kai is that it has added a long list of complexities to the central characters and blurred the lines between right and wrong and good and bad. This is reinforced further in relation to Allie's return. In the second movie, Allie is written out in one line where Daniel says she crashed his car and left him for a guy from UCLA.
She tells me that she's just fallen in love with some football player.
Allie shows it's a little more complex than that though upon her return to Cobra Kai, saying that she was just talking to someone from UCLA when Daniel freaked out and became jealous. I know this isn't just me that thinks this, but Daniel really isn't the hero of this story. But you know, more on that later on. Now on to one of the tastier Easter eggs and coolest pieces of trivia. In another piece of loaded Kreese dialogue, Kreese says, "Let me tell you about your dad. He was always a scrapper.
But the moment I knew he was the real deal was his first All-Valley.
He made the quarters, but he drew a kid named Vidal." Now, Johnny defeats Vidal in the 1984 All-Valley tournament to make it to the finals, but that's not the fight Kreese is referencing here. He is paying reference to Johnny's first year of competition in 1981, when he first went up against Vidal. But what makes this more interesting is that the actor behind Vidal is attributed to the infamous crane kick on IMDb. You know, the illegal move where Daniel knocks out Johnny? That one. Now, as you know, Johnny uses Facebook to get back in touch with Allie, but he also has some Easter egg-worthy Facebook friends. Look carefully and you will see he is friends with Shane Keller and Mallory Yund, both of whom are producers on the show. Ah, poor naive Johnny. Never befriend your bosses on social media. It never goes well, trust me. Like golf and stuff, skeleton outfits also have a constant importance in both Cobra Kai and The Karate Kid. In the original movie, Johnny and the Cobra Kai crew can all be seen wearing those infamous skeleton costumes during Halloween. Now, while the skeleton costume is referenced early on in Cobra Kai, with Miguel wearing a similar costume in the show, they also pay reference to the skeleton costume in Season 3. When Cobra Kai invades LaRusso's home in the big climax of Season 3, can you guess what one of them is wearing? Yep, you guessed it. Look closely enough at Tori's sweater, and of course, you will see skeleton bones.
You better watch your back.
Now, this next Easter egg might just be us looking too far into things, but knowing how the minds behind Cobra Kai operate, we are pretty sure that this is a very deliberate Easter egg. While at the SDJC, we see Robbie reading a copy of the literary classic Lord of the Flies, which on the surface doesn't have many parallels with Cobra Kai, unless the show is going to take a very dark turn down the road. But is it probably a very wink wink nudge nudge to the maestro, Mr. Miyagi? Because who is the lord at catching flies with chopsticks? Yep, Mr. Miyagi. Okay, maybe this one is a stretch, but seriously, I'm not putting it past them to have made that an Easter egg, unless Robbie just happens to be a fan of the classics. No offense, but that is kind of unlikely. One of the most famous objects to be introduced in The Karate Kid Part 2 is the Okinawa hand drum, which is a very real traditional music item. But since it was in Part 2, it has very much been linked with the franchise. In Part 2, Daniel is inspired by the drums in his fight with Chozen and even uses the drum techniques to eventually defeat him. Seeing how important it is to the franchise, it is therefore no surprise then that the item makes an appearance in Cobra Kai when Miguel comes across it. Sam even shows Miguel the famous hand trick that Miyagi once taught Daniel back in the day and basically passes down the torch. Or drum, in this case.
Is that my drum in your pocket?
Hawk's wardrobe pays many callbacks to the original franchise, and to be honest, so does Hawk in general, with him riding on a motorbike similar to the Cobra Kai crew in the original movie. But focusing more on his wardrobe for a second, we see Hawk wearing a bright red jacket in Season 3, which is very reminiscent of the one worn by Johnny in the original movie. Now, we have already mentioned it, but there has been a constant debate surrounding the legality of the crane kick that Daniel uses on Johnny at the end of the movie. You already know my thoughts on the subject. Now, Cobra Kai has never shied away from this debate and even makes fun of it in the very first episode, where Johnny also brings into question the move's legality.
It was an illegal kick.
The showrunners decided to stoke the fire even more by making reference to it again in Season 3, when Miguel says the line,
"Sensei Lawrence told me about how you beat him with an illegal kick."
Hey. The rules state anything above the waist is legal.
Yeah, this debate isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But they don't need to convince me otherwise. I know it was illegal, Daniel, and you know what they say. Cheaters never prosper. Except I guess they did in this case, because he won. So... But of course, it's not just the crane kick that has fans debating online. Like Star Wars and especially the Who Shot First debate, there are a number of Karate Kid debates. But other than the crane kick, the most notable has to be who is the real Karate Kid. Seeing as the movie centers on Daniel, the safe money is on him. But if you're like me, Barney Stinson,
whom this monster defeated with a cheap, illegal head kick,
and a few others on the internet, you will know the true Karate Kid is Johnny Lawrence. But we are not just a small band of misfits here. This theory is actually pretty popular on the internet and, with Cobra Kai, is quickly gaining traction. Like the crane kick debate, the show's producers make reference to this debate and stoke the flames through a piece of dialogue. In the first episode of Season 3, Daniel says,
"When I went to school here, I was bullied, and karate saved me."
I heard you were the real bully.
Johnny clearly isn't the only one that thinks Daniel was the villain of the movie. What makes this funnier is that the voice of the off-screen man is none other than the show's co-creator, Josh Head. See, he knows what's up.
Just switch it to where the athletes are wearing shoes.
Ah, young grasshopper. You want to see Cobra Kai behind-the-scenes secrets, do you? Well, you've come to the right place. Wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. Oh, sorry. Is this thing on? I was waxing my car. You're probably here because, like a huge portion of the internet, you are a Zabka-sized fan of the smash hit Netflix, formerly YouTube series, Cobra Kai. The show has been an absolute revelation on the streaming network and is one of their most popular shows. Not only are fans of the original Karate Kid movie drawn to it, but it's also found a new, younger fan base, and with Season 4 on the way, the buzz isn't going to quiet down anytime soon. But as you wait for the upcoming season, we thought we'd give you young grasshoppers a reward for your patience with some behind-the-scenes secrets from the show. From crazy workout regimens, Easter eggs to the original movie, and that famous fight scene. Get ready to enter the dojo of Cobra Kai, and by the end, you'll be catching a fly with chopsticks. Well, obviously not, we don't have that power, but just go with it.
Am I right? Yes, Sensei! Wrong!
Cobra Kai may be a huge hit, and Johnny Lawrence, or as Barney Stinson would say, the real Karate Kid, actor Billy Zabka may love being on the show, but he was initially reluctant to reprise the role of Johnny. This may be in part down to the fact that he was often typecast after the release of Karate Kid in 1984, with Zabka performing in a string of similar movies. Zabka is now happy he made the decision to return and said that he's thrilled to perform with his old co-star Ralph Macchio, who he shares a special bond with. Macchio is also happy to be back in the dojo, but also commended the writing staff as well as the young actors who make up the show. Both were also quick to share the sentiment that they are happy to bring the Karate Kid world to a new, younger audience. One thing that made the transition for Zabka easier to return to the character was the fact that he had kept up with his martial arts training since the days of Karate Kid. Despite not being the spirited young man he once was, Zabka did continue to spar and train on and off, and even got to the level of a second-degree green belt. Macchio, however, had not been keeping up with his training since Karate Kid, and while he still was an ambassador to the art, he was a little bit rusty when returning to the role of Daniel and had to catch up quickly. But you can see a notable difference between the sharpness of the two foes in the first season. But with Macchio now back in the swing of things, a face-off between the two becomes an even tastier prospect. But as I mentioned before, Zabka isn't quite the young man he used to be, and unfortunately found that out the hard way as he got into a little accident on set. During an interview, Zabka stated that during the first fight scene, he ended up pulling his hamstring. But that's not all. He also said that he managed to break his toe when he ended up jamming it, and said that it went right back into his foot. Yeah, ouch, that has gotta hurt. Despite being in intense pain and having to hobble over to the side, Zabka continued shooting the scene and kept going on like a trooper, which I think is kind of in keeping with the character, to be honest. But of course, Cobra Kai is not just about Daniel and Johnny, with a great young cast at its center. The show consists of some truly awesome fight scenes, like really awesome, and while stunt actors are used for the riskier moves, the actors were also very involved in the fight sequences. Like the characters they played, they were all relative newcomers to martial arts, and therefore were like a blank canvas. But stunt coordinator Hiro Koda, who is also the stunt coordinator on another Netflix show, Stranger Things, ran into one problem, but it's not the one you might expect. Despite their amateur status and the actors learning martial arts as they went along, they picked it up very quickly. Too quickly, in fact. Koda said that the actors were getting too good and were performing at a higher level than their characters, so actually, it had to be toned down, which I mean is a nice problem to have. This might be down to some of the crazy and intense workout schedules the actors engage in. Xolo Medahuena, who plays Miguel on the show, said that he has a 2 to 4 hour training regimen consisting of professional stunts, martial arts, boxing, strength, and yoga to keep him in shape, and said that it's the hardest thing that he has to do. Yeah, no kidding, dude. Alternatively, my routine of tacos, video games, sleeping, watching TV, and yelling at inanimate objects when I lose video games also keeps me in shape, but that shape is slightly more circular. But it's not just a lot of time and effort that got into mine and Xolo's workout routines, but also the costume design. For Hawk actor Jacob Bertrand, he spends 25 to 45 minutes in the makeup chair for them to ply his trademark back tattoo, with the time dependent on how much he moves around in a scene. But that is almost nothing compared to the amount of time that goes into his mohawk, which takes 1 whole hour to do. An hour! To be fair, that is one awesome mohawk. That is an hour well spent. One of the things that makes Cobra Kai successful is the fact that it manages to be its own thing, but at the same time, pay loving homage to the Karate Kid series that influenced it. That's because it was created by Cobra Kai superfans John Hurwitz, Josh Held, and Hayden Schlossberg, who expertly put a number of Easter eggs from the original film throughout the series. One of which comes in the very first episode, which includes the fight scene between Daniel and Johnny from the '84 film, as well as showing never-before-seen footage from the movie. Some of the perks of being in a hit TV show or movie is that you get to keep some of the goodies and props, and that was the case for Samantha actor Mary Mauser, who got to keep the outfit that she wore on her date with Miguel. That's because Mauser was very sick during the cast photo shoot, so the costume designer actually let her keep the outfit. Hey, Screen Rant, what's the deal here? Where's my free outfit? I could do with some new clothes. I have been wearing the same outfit for weeks like a cartoon character. Quarantine, am I right? Like Felina and Ozymandias in Breaking Bad, and long-term parking and members only in Sopranos, a great level of detail and hidden meaning goes into the episode titles of Cobra Kai, such as the title of the first episode of Season 1, Ace Degenerate, which is a reference to a line of dialogue from the original movie.
No thanks, pal.
Johnny, who you kidding? You're silly, Ace Degenerate.
Cobra Kai and Karate Kid certainly have an established diehard fan base, especially if you grew up with the original movie back in the 80s. That is certainly the case for Will Smith, who grew up as a fan of the original movie and loves it so much that he's actually a producer for Cobra Kai. Of course, one of the best things about Cobra Kai is the epic fight scenes which make up the show, but they can cause a lot of pressure and anxiety for the actors performing in them, especially for Peyton List, who plays Tori, who didn't have much time to prepare for her fight scene, which caused her to be nervous during filming. Alternatively, the toughest fight for actor Mary Mauser was the epic fight scene at the end of Season 2, something which we will excitedly go into further detail later on. Back to the Easter eggs now. In the second episode of Season 1, Miguel asks Johnny if there's a particular way he wants him to wash the windows, to which Johnny replies, "I don't give a shirt," except he doesn't say shirt. This is an obvious reference to a certain line from the original movie, we referenced it earlier, but also showcases the different teaching styles between Johnny and Mr. Miyagi. While Cobra Kai may be set in Los Angeles and does shoot some of their scenes there, like a majority of Marvel films, the show is actually based in Atlanta, Georgia, with the Cobra Kai dojo actually being located in Atlanta. Apparently, the cast quickly warmed to the city, with Mauser saying that she fell in love with a burger place called Fred's, where she ate at nearly every day. Who knew that burgers were good for martial arts training? What are in those burgers? See, my training schedule doesn't look so dumb now, does it, huh? Either way, if I'm ever in Atlanta, I am going to Fred's. But despite the hot filming locations, that does not mean that it doesn't get cold from time to time. During the filming of Season 2, Episode 7, which is located in the woods, filming apparently took place on a very cold day, with the actors being freezing cold and struggling to deal with the slippery and muddy conditions. It's hard to imagine anyone else as Tori now, but apparently Peyton List didn't think that she would get the part. The actor, who at the time was better known for her work on the Disney Channel, said that she got the audition super last minute and she didn't imagine in her wildest dreams that she would get it, but was super excited when she did indeed land the role. Good for her. I'm still waiting to hear if I got the role of the child on The Mandalorian. I think I might have missed out. As promised, now we move on to the epic fight scene that took place at the end of Season 2, which is awesome enough to have a video on its own. The fight scene, which took place in a school, was filmed on a tight schedule, with them only having 4 days to get it right. Like the hallway fight scene from Daredevil, they wanted it to have a one-shot take, meaning that there are no cuts in the camera or in the acting. The time constraint also meant that the actors only had 2 days to plan the choreography of their moves. In terms of blocking, actors would have to quickly go off camera and hide behind the extras while their stunt doubles replaced them in the scene. And eagle-eyed viewers can quickly see this happening during the take. During one part in the scene, Mauser also ended up with a bad injury after misplacing her hand and took a bad blow which left her in the ER. Mauser returned the next day to finish the shoot, but if you look carefully, you can see where her hand is taped due to the injury. But that is almost nothing compared to Tanner's stunt double, Kane, who apparently has 2 fake front teeth, which were knocked out in one moment when he hit his head on the floor. Later on, we see Xolo kicking a railing, but he maybe kicked it a little too hard, with him actually breaking it. I wonder if they put him in detention for that. But the most shocking scene was seeing Miguel falling from the railing. I guess that's karma for breaking it. This required 2 balance beams to support him and a wire around his waist so that the actor didn't actually plummet to the ground. He was then dropped at a third of the speed that he would have actually been dropped before being replaced by the stunt double, who took the blow like an absolute champ.
This is it. This is the end of the line. Telling me.
We never thought that we would want a Karate Kid sequel that was all about the bad guy, and yet, here we are. The Cobra Kai YouTube turned Netflix TV show is a continuation of the very famous 80s classic set 34 years after the events of the movie took place. While you might have thought they'd focus on Daniel LaRusso, the hero of the original film, instead, the creators decided to make it all about his bully, Johnny Lawrence. Turns out that they made the right choice, but they did have to change a few other things along the way. Keep watching to find out all of the ways that the creators of Cobra Kai have changed, reimagined, and added on to the legendary story of the Karate Kid.
Because I get killed if I show up there.
Get killed anyway.
While John Kreese, the infamous Cobra Kai teacher from Karate Kid, was a powerful instructor, we all know that he was a pretty bad guy. He taught his students some very dangerous methods and ideas that were actually pretty antithetical to the ideas behind karate. And we get to learn that Johnny really disliked Kreese and his teachings. But what was different about the second season of Cobra Kai was that when Johnny meets up with his old karate buddies, we find out that they all hated Kreese as well. And when we find out that he's helping Johnny teach at Cobra Kai again, they're all shocked and horrified that he would allow Kreese to teach more kids the things that he taught them. As adults, they were able to look back and realize just how truly terrible his teachings were, and how much more damage he did than good. We all knew in Karate Kid that Johnny grew up in a home with some serious family money, but even though we normally assume that money makes things better, in Cobra Kai we learn that Johnny actually had a pretty horrible time at home. He lived with his mom and his stepfather, and while his mother was loving towards her son, his stepdad was abusive and manipulative. He told the young Johnny over and over again that he would never amount to anything, and Johnny took those words to heart. It gives us a whole other perspective into why Johnny behaved the way he did, and why he became a bully in the first place. And finally, 34 years later, we get to see Johnny stand up to the man who made his childhood a miserable experience, and it's such a triumphant moment for the character. We know that Johnny and Daniel went very separate ways after the end of the Karate Kid, but what we didn't know was just how much Daniel would continue to be idolized after his big win. Well, in Cobra Kai, they make it very clear that everyone in town knew about his victory, and that he's been treated very differently than Johnny for years because of it. So much so that he was able to parlay it into a successful business off of the back of that win. And Johnny's life went, well, not quite as smoothly. This goes to really highlight just how different these men's lives are when we see them again after 34 years, and how one moment can really alter the course of someone's life in an instant. Karate Kid would have us believe that both Daniel and Johnny's lives were nothing but all karate all the time. So much so that we might have thought that they would both go on to own their own dojos long after the movie ended. Well, in Cobra Kai, we learned that, like a lot of young people, karate was actually just a phase for both boys. We don't know how long they continued to study it after the final tournament, but it's clear at the beginning of Cobra Kai that neither of them have practiced in a very long time. Now, Daniel simply uses it to promote his business, and Johnny only thinks back on it as a hard time in his life. Even though they both wind up back in the dojo and reigniting their passion for the martial art, it's a pretty cool take to show us that the events that take place in these movies are really just one moment in time for their characters. Ah, the crane kick. Possibly one of the most iconic shots in 1980s movie history, but while it's always been framed as a moment of triumph for Daniel, Cobra Kai actually takes the time to put this huge moment in a slightly different perspective. See, while we all know that Kreese was encouraging Johnny to pull some illegal maneuvers on Daniel during their epic final fight, it's also true that a kick to the face is, in itself, an illegal move. That's right. Daniel's triumph actually came in the form of a move that was very much not allowed during this kind of face-off, but he totally got away with it. While they don't dwell on this in Cobra Kai, or use it as a way to make Daniel to be a villain at all, it is important to acknowledge that he is not a perfect person, and both boys were not exactly acting above board. Of course, so much time has passed by the time we get to this revelation that it doesn't really haunt either Daniel or Johnny, but it does add some complexity to their long-standing rivalry. Where Daniel LaRusso was without a doubt the hero of Karate Kid, he was the Karate Kid after all, Cobra Kai has taken a slightly different approach in how his character is portrayed some 30 years after his greatest triumph. While Daniel might not be as down on his luck as Johnny, and would appear to have turned himself into quite a success as the years have gone by, the show takes great care to make sure that we see him as a guy with problems of his own, and he is kind of cheesy. Even though he has a successful car dealership that earns him a comfortable living, we can see in the commercials that he stars in that he is still living in the past. He uses his former glory as Karate Kid to sell cars, executing some karate punches intercut with lines about chopping prices. Yeah, you get it? He even opens the commercial by saying "Bonsai," which we think Mr. Miyagi himself probably wouldn't have liked in the least. This doesn't make Daniel a bad person, of course, it just shows that he's forgotten some of the most important of Mr. Miyagi's teachings over the years, and has instead used them to sell his products. When you think back about Karate Kid as an adult, it becomes clear that the real villain in the whole thing isn't the 16-year-old Johnny, but the very grown-up John Kreese, Johnny's vicious and vengeful karate teacher. This man spends his time teaching young and impressionable boys that they can and should use violence to deal with just about any of their problems, and is pretty much the exact opposite of Mr. Miyagi. He is the one who rejects Daniel and Miyagi's peace offering after Johnny and the gang beat up Daniel, and he coaches his students to use illegal moves on Daniel during the fight. Luckily, in Cobra Kai, both Johnny and Daniel have completely moved on from having him in their lives whatsoever. He did disappear after the events of Karate Kid, but none of Johnny's students at Cobra Kai have ever heard of him, as it's clear that Johnny never took the time to teach them about who he is. We've already talked about how this show is told from a very different point of view, and that of course is Johnny's. One of the most unexpected things about Cobra Kai was that it would be examining the story from Johnny's perspective, and we don't think it would have been the same without doing so. In Karate Kid, we never really learn about why Johnny is the way he is, or really anything about his life. In fact, we rarely do. In most movies about good guys versus bad guys, you never get to see the side of the so-called bad guy. Instead, they're just a one-sided foil for the good guy to overcome, rather than an actual person. What Cobra Kai does so well is show us that, in reality, there are usually really complex reasons why bullies are the way they are, and that the lines between good and bad are actually quite blurry. We never really know what someone is dealing with in their own life because we have no choice but to worry about our own. Cobra Kai probably would have gotten old a lot faster and be a much less compelling story overall if it was just the same old bad guy versus good guy story, but because it turned all of that on its head and presented Johnny as a whole person with some real struggles of his own, it really keeps us coming back for more. Right at the beginning of the original Karate Kid, we learn that Johnny and his high school sweetheart Allie had already broken up. Allie then becomes one of the first people that Daniel befriends when he and his mom move from New Jersey to Los Angeles, where the movie begins. This friendship between Allie and Daniel is one of the main reasons why Johnny and his gang of bullies go after Daniel, and serves as a catalyst for all of the conflict between them. But the one thing we never know when watching the original is why exactly Allie and Johnny broke up to begin with. Well, in Cobra Kai, they finally give us the long-awaited answer to that question. In the second season of the show, Johnny goes out with all of his old karate friends and they reminisce about the good old days when they used to run around and get into trouble in high school. It turns out that before the events of Karate Kid took place, one of these nights was Allie's birthday. Johnny and the gang went out and had a little too much to drink, and he missed her birthday completely. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, and after 2 years, Allie ended things for good. One of the absolute coolest things about the first episode of Cobra Kai was how the filmmakers used original footage from Karate Kid to start the entire series off with a bang, or more accurately, a kick. The very first moments of the new series takes place in the final seconds of Karate Kid during the fight between Daniel and Johnny. It was the perfect way to drop the audience right back into the world of Karate Kid, and now Cobra Kai. But it wasn't just pulled right from the movie. They actually added in some Karate Kid footage of the fight that had never been seen before. They added a bunch of different shots that illustrate the fight from Johnny's perspective in order to change the mood from Daniel's triumph to Johnny's defeat. They also included the moment where Kreese tells Johnny to use the illegal foot sweep and highlight Johnny's reaction, which shows how hesitant he was to break the rules in that way. All of this is done to shed some light on Johnny's memory of how the fight went down, because he's going to be the character who we follow for the rest of Cobra Kai.
Alright, you want my advice? Stop being so annoying.
For years, it's been fun to point to the original Karate Kid and say, so if one of the rules was no kicks to the face, then how come Daniel won with a kick to the face? Well, I'm about to karate chop that myth down. Basically, head kicks were okay, but head punches were the big no-no. Boom! So that's not a plot hole. But hey, don't worry, we got a lot more actual Cobra Kai plot holes coming your way right now. Look, I don't want to be a downer here, and I love an aggressive, spontaneous house break-in that leads to a devastating karate fight as much as the next guy. But come on, call the police, people! And no, I don't mean to call Sting and his band The Police to write an awesome 80s song to accompany all the awesome karate sequences. I mean the literal, actual police. Maybe the first 2 seasons there was enough plausible deniability to avoid getting the police involved, but come on. Parts in the 3rd season took things way too far. Hawk broke Dimitri's arm in the laser tag arena. Even if Sam's group technically started that fight, the escalation there should have led to some arrests. And then that final fight at the LaRusso house where Cobra Kai literally threw a kid through a window, busted in and started fighting is like the very definition of breaking and entering an assault. All of them could serve time for such an act. So for it all to be resolved with Johnny and Daniel trying to fight Kreese themselves and for some reason agreeing to settle it all at the All Valley tournament is kind of insane, right? Even if there's a weird restraining order against Amanda that Kreese filed, that shouldn't be an excuse. But hey, I get it, if the police were involved, no more karate, and then what's the point? Okay, don't lie. How many of you put on a white robe and started practicing karate in your garage after watching the show? I mean, I know my grocery bill went through the roof because I bought so many watermelons to smash. But that's just because Cobra Kai made karate look so cool. And if I'm being honest, it also made karate look kind of easy. Like, I feel like if I spent one afternoon with Daniel in the forest balancing on a log or something, then I'd at least walk away with a bronze medal at the All Valley tournament. And that sort of applies to just about everyone in the show. They all become basic karate masters after very minimal training. Realistically, with hardcore training, you'll become a black belt in like 5 or so years. Everyone seems to be an expert at fighting after only like a few weeks. Man, Johnny, Daniel, and even Kreese might just be the most amazing teachers in all of existence. Like, Johnny can't figure out how to turn on a computer, but he can teach a kid how to karate chop after like 1 or 2 inspirational speeches? That's really impressive. Daniel LaRusso has a saintly wife who is way too good for him and a wonderful daughter who is close to perfect. And that's it. That's the LaRusso family. Moving on, and oh wait, what's that? Daniel has another child? Oh, that's right, there's a second LaRusso kid, and he's just the worst. In the first season, he was nothing more than a comic relief that sat around, kept his nose in his electronics, and complained about everything. He was probably the most unlikable character in the show, and Cobra Kai wisely sidelined Anthony. But it's weird that we don't get more time with him. Like, where is he most of the time? Where was he during the season 3 finale when Sam was having the party at the house and the LaRussos were out with Johnny and Allie? Was he just upstairs playing video games and blocking out the noise of the mass carnage happening downstairs? Anthony is just a weird character that the show doesn't know what to do with, and the longer they ignore him, the stranger it becomes. Like, Daniel is super obsessed with training Sam and instilling in her the ideals of his mentor, Mr. Miyagi, but then doesn't mind ignoring his son? Doesn't that seem strange? Maybe in the next season, Anthony will have an actual storyline, and here's just a wild guess, I would bet he learns karate. Tori was introduced in Season 2 of Cobra Kai and promptly proceeded to mess up everything.
Although we knew she had a darker side to her and would be a major thorn in the side of our heroes, I don't think any of us expected her to incite a full-on school riot. She became a major Miguel love interest, and although I wasn't quite sold on their feelings for each other, I guess Tori just fell so absolutely head over heels in love with him that she'd risk jail time for Miguel. Maybe you can say the epic karate fight was all in good fun and no one took it that seriously, but Tori pulled a weapon and was really trying to hurt Sam in that moment. Like, what if Sam wasn't blocking some of those attacks? Sam would have walked away with so much more than just a vicious scar. But speaking of that whole situation, isn't it kind of weird what happened as a result of that? We're told that Tori was expelled, yes, but we're told that she doesn't face actual jail time because she's taking care of her sick mother. Which I guess is understandable, but doesn't she also have a brother she's taking care of? I know the police barely do anything in the show, but you would think social services would be called at that point. Here's hoping Tori's brother and Anthony LaRusso develop their own blood feud in Season 4. Look, I understand we live in a karate universe where magic hands can heal wounds if you rub them together, and massive karate fights with about 1,000 punches thrown leave barely any bruises or internal bleeding. But I'm giving a serious eyebrow raise toward Miguel's recovery and rehabilitation. When I close my eyes at night, I can still see Miguel hitting that banister and breaking his back. And it looked like he would be out of commission for a very long time, if not forever. But I guess I don't understand how comas and back injuries work. I guess all it takes is winning a karate fight in your mind to overcome the coma. Quick, someone alert modern medicine, stat! But I think even after he woke up, the timeline for when he got better seemed a little rushed. Like, he went from barely being able to stand to throwing away his crutches and walking again to getting back into fighting shape practically instantly. Like, sure, there was that one moment where he couldn't kick very well, but then the finale literally saw him take on a whole house full of Cobra Kai people and being dealt injuries that seemed just as bad as breaking his back on that school banister. Seemed a little too quick in my book. Here's how the sequence of events seemed to go. Robbie was charged with nearly crippling Miguel. He ran from the police, then didn't turn himself in like Daniel suggested so that it looked better, and instead was caught and dragged to jail. But because time seems to work a little differently in Cobra Kai's universe, it seemed like he wasn't in jail that long. Just long enough to turn to the dark side, but not long enough to really affect the plot. I don't know, do you think Robbie got enough jail time? Do you think he should have served less? The exact nature of his crimes and charges weren't really explained, so I guess it's unclear how much time he should serve. But the whole thing just seemed odd, and was the show really trying to make Robbie angry enough at the world that he would turn to Kreese for advice for some reason? Okay, maybe this is basically the "they can't get us all" type of mantra, but isn't it strange that no one was expelled in the epic school fight besides Tori because she brandished a weapon? Like, Dimitri and Hawk vandalized school property when Dimitri threw Hawk through that glass case, but no issues there? Maybe it was a thing where the school was so confused why so many of its students knew karate, and why a random man applying for the janitor job suddenly stepped up and also knew karate, that they just didn't bother to fully expel anyone. And again, I get it. If they were all expelled, then there wouldn't be that much of a story. But they couldn't come up with a better story element, like long suspensions, detentions, community service, etc. It seemed like they went back to school and everyone was okay. If that wasn't enough, the kids basically got into a karate fight 2.0 on the soccer field and suffered no consequences whatsoever. Alright, this is super weird. Sometimes Johnny Lawrence can clean up nicely and look like $1,000,000. Other times he looks like a microwaved 7-Eleven burrito that was tossed out in last week's garbage. Throughout the series, we've seen Johnny reach incredible highs and sink to incredible lows. And while he's at his lowest, one big thing that always seems like an issue is where exactly does Johnny get his money from? He was dirt poor and barely could afford anything when he first rented his dojo, but then things turned around. With just a few students, it seemed like he was able to have an endless supply of money to burn and buy new things. Yeah, there's his rich stepdad, but he barely takes anything from him unless it's absolutely necessary. Like, how much does Miguel and the other students pay for karate classes? Is it enough to support his seemingly never-ending supply of Coors banquets? Like, really, karate classes cost like $40 an hour, and should meet like a few times a week. Is every student paying this? These are the questions I want answered. And speaking of money, where does Daniel get all of his money from? Yes, I know he's a successful car dealer, but does that really account for his ability to just cut his hours in half, renovate an entire dojo, spend time teaching karate, and all the costs that come with that? How about when Daniel lost his business and they were on the verge of losing everything, Daniel just casually flew to Japan to try to fix it? Those tickets aren't cheap. Maybe the LaRussos just have a ton of money put away, but still, the fact that finance almost never seems like an issue even for Daniel is a little strange. Maybe he's still living off endorsements for being the All-Valley champion like 30 years ago. It's the only thing that makes sense. The karate shown in Cobra Kai has always wowed us, but is it even correct? Well, not according to this last plot hole. Now, this one's only for die-hard fans, but it's still fascinating. So, the Karate Kid franchise incorporates the real-life technique of the Goju Ryu tradition of karate. This system was founded by the legendary karate master Miyagi Shojin, and there's even a picture of him shown in the Cobra Kai TV show. But one real-life karate instructor has pointed out that the practices that we see in the show are not from the Goju Ryu school of karate. So if you're a big karate nerd, this is something you'd probably notice. Going back to Anthony LaRusso for a second, I actually think he's been secretly training these past few years and he'll rise up to be the strongest karate champion ever. Or he'll just complain about breakfast again. One of those two.